Hi there. Welcome to another segment of Recognizing and Eliminating the Impostor Syndrome. I'm really excited to share my guest with you today. Oh my gosh, I could probably just let him sit here and then just talk and talk and talk and not let him get a word in edgewise, but I am going to let him talk. But I want you to catch my enthusiasm, my eagerness, my all over happiness at being able to share some time with John today. He is an amazing author. He is a best-selling international author. I have every single one of his books. I think the Why Café should be mandatory reading for every student in school, but that's my opinion. He has multiple, like I said, international best-selling books. He has a book that he's just released, which we will talk about. He's been honored next to people such as Oprah Winfrey, Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra. So if you're wondering whether you want to keep watching this video, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I'm thinking you'll want to stick with us. John, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks. It's awesome to be have the opportunity to spend some more time with you. Thank you so much for the invitation to join your show. Very excited to be here.
Thank you. You know, your work has really impacted me, I will say, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. And when I say financially, it's because of the abundance part of it. Your work, I have shared it with workshops that I teach. I suggest to people, you know, all right, you want to go out and get the big five for life, and we're going to talk about certain things. And it's not so much sharing what your programs are, but introducing your work so that people can think outside of the box, so to speak, or realize that there is no box, I guess.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's the highest compliment possible as an author, when someone enjoys something that you've created enough that they then share it with someone else. And so thank you for that.
Honestly, I feel just as excited to share your books as I do my own. So I can't even begin to tell people, and I know I might sound like, you know, that it's all about just like, oh, get over it, Nancy. But when you find something that truly makes you think, that truly inspires you and impacts your thought process, you want to share it with the world. And to me, that's what your work does.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's, you know, whether you're making donuts or you're doing inspirational work in the form of books or podcasts or otherwise, there's so much noise out there today. And that is really the goal, is to create something that connects with people on a heart level or just a general enjoyment level enough that, yeah, they want to talk to other people about it. And that's when I'm writing something, I always say, if I make myself laugh, it'll make someone else laugh. If I make myself cry, it'll make someone else cry. And that authenticity, I think, is one of the keys to not just creating success in whatever the vehicle is that you're working towards success for, but also for genuinely being excited about waking up in the morning and doing whatever it is that we do.
Exactly. I think before we go any farther, because I just realized, like, it makes perfect sense to me, but can you share why the background that you have, what that's all about, so it comes from you?
Yeah, sure. I did not have a background in writing. I wasn't one of those folks who dreamed of writing by any stretch. As a matter of fact, I had a very rocky start to my existence, if you will. And without giving all the details, I will say that I was quite poor for a long, long time. I really struggled trying to figure out not just who I was as a human being, but where my place was in the world and really what was the point of it all. I remember distinctly thinking about that as I was growing up. Like, wait, what is the point of all this? You know, I see a lot of unhappy adults out there, and the path seems to be that you go to school, which I didn't really like school. And so it's like, you do this, and then the big payoff after that is then you get a job that you don't like. Then you do that until you get your 1 or 2 weeks of vacation a year, and then you die. And I remember it's kind of weird being a young person and having that awareness, but I had those thoughts running through my head, and the overarching principle was, so why? What is the point of all this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I embarked on what I was envisioning and hoping would be something that was more in line with my interests. And that I thought I wanted to be a pilot. I had no background as a pilot, no experience as a pilot. And again, I was quite poor. So that path was a huge hurdle to overcome. And I worked and worked and worked from the age of 12 to try and make that dream a reality. And then when I was in my early 20s, everything that I had worked for was stripped away from me because I was diagnosed with a heart condition that had never been diagnosed before. And so literally every single penny that I had saved and invested from working countless hours of my life was gone. And the dream was gone too. It wasn't just that the money was gone, the dream was gone too. And that really completely took the wind out of me for a good year. But luckily, I have discovered as I've lived long enough on the planet, Nancy, that sometimes these things happen because you're either not aware of the signs, which was certainly the case in my instance. I didn't know how to recognize the signs, or you're just not following the signs. I've done that in my life too. Mm-hmm. But here I am now, fast forward, and I have literally a life that I could have never imagined. I work on projects that I'm so excited about. I write books that make a difference in the lives of other people. If someone had told me when I was 18, 19, 20, you're going to write a book someday and someone will tell you that it changed their life, I'd have said, yeah, there is a 0% chance of that happening. And here we are now. You know, the books, as you mentioned, have sold millions of copies around the world. And far more important than the number is the impact.
Right.
You know, just yesterday I was sharing with one of my team members, we got a really beautiful email from a young 16-year-old kid in Europe, just saying how much the book means to them, that they really have a perspective about life now. And it was the first Café book. So it's been a very rocky road, but what I realize is that had all of that other stuff not happened, I would not be where I am today. I would have been an airline pilot, and there would have been nothing wrong with that. But here's the thing. A lot of other people can be really good airline pilots, just like me. But for whatever reason, I am particularly good at this. And there's not everybody else can do what I do. This is, for whatever reason, what part of my calling is. It's part of my purpose. And so what I've learned is that when we feel like, wow, the universe is really just pounding it on today, maybe there's a reason for that, that if we can step back, and my favorite question is not, why is this happening to me? Which is what I used to think in those moments, but from a place of curiosity to ask that question, so why is this happening? Right. And if I can step far enough back from it and detach enough from it, I often see that there is a guiding presence that is leading me towards something which honestly is a much higher calling for me. And it allows me to be in the sweet spot of what I do well. And that has certainly been the case with my authorship. But I'll be the first to say it was not an easy path by any stretch. But maybe that's what makes me relatable. You know, maybe if it had been super easy, people would be saying, well, easy for you to say, dude. It was right. Walk in the park the whole way, right? Mm-hmm. But when I stand in front of an audience, or when I stand in front of a line of people that are asking to get their book signed, and I look up at that person and they start telling me their story, and it's a powerful and emotional story, I can put myself right in their shoes because I've walked those shoes.
And as I was thinking about having this conversation with you today, what really fell into place for me was so many people are following that path. Like you said, okay, well, I think that I should do this because this is what everybody tells me is right. But we actually are taught to grow up and become an imposter. You know, we are walking around doing things that aren't really what our soul came here to do. And when you find some information like your work that helps you step out of that and helps you think in a different direction, then you start to say, oh, okay, well, maybe I could just pull back these layers, these imposter layers, little by little.
Yeah. And I really think that's part of the challenge of life, honestly. And that's a wonderful expression that you're talking about, this imposter syndrome. One of the things that I wrote about in the book that you mentioned earlier was this idea of challenging every belief that you have. Mm-hmm. And asking a very simple question, which is, why do I believe that? Yes. And so many of our beliefs are built upon something we saw in a TV show or a movie or read in a book or that an adult shared with us when we were a child. And it can be everything from money beliefs to beliefs about how we view the package we're sitting inside of as a soul. to the way in which we should, a very simple example of that is, don't talk to strangers, right? How many kids were told, I was told that, don't talk to strangers. And there is a time and a place where that makes perfect sense as you're learning to grow and adapt in the world. But at some point, if I was just locked into that belief system and I never quite identified what does that mean to me, I couldn't do a podcast. I'm talking to a stranger.
Right.
I couldn't stand in front of people that are waiting in line to get books signed because now I'm talking to strangers. And I know that's sort of a laughable example, but that's where that discomfort comes from inside of us, is that we have a belief system and we have an action, and that action is either going to be in alignment or misalignment with the belief system. And when we feel that anxiety and that tension, it's because of this. And so by asking yourself, why do I believe these things that I believe? Oh my gosh, it is amazing what you can uncover about yourself, about the pure green fields of potential that exists for our personal growth. And I think going beyond the imposter syndrome, how many people have gone through their life and someone said, you know what, he's just not athletic, or she's really shy, or whatever. And then we just, at some point, and then one person says it, they hear it, and then they start commenting that also, like a family reunion, right? One person says, well, gosh, John's really shy. And then 3 other relatives hear it, and then they meet some other people. Yeah, John, he's kind of shy, right? Next thing you know, a single comment becomes a norm associated with your behavior, and you got to break out of that, or at least choose to define it for yourself.
Exactly. Can you share about the safari, the Big Five for life, why that all means so much to you? It's such a fascinating story.
Thank you. So when I was in my early 30s, I decided to take a dramatic left turn in life. And so I had finally gotten myself on track. The universe had gifted me a couple of opportunities after my whole flying dreams had been taken away. And so life was actually better, a lot better than it had been during that phase. But I was not happy. I just felt like something was missing. I was doing business strategy consulting work. I was very good at it. I was well paid for it. But I was working crazy long hours, and I just would get home on the weekends because I would be flying out every Monday, flying home every Friday. And I would get home on the weekends and in a cab on the way back to my little apartment, and I would just feel empty. And I would look at the people that were 10 years older than me in my company, and I knew in my heart of hearts, I did not want to be doing that 10 years from now. And so left it all behind, went and backpacked around the world with my wife. We had been married for all of 6 weeks. And so off we went, backpacked around the world for a year on $40 a day. And it was absolutely completely life-changing. And, I think a lot of people, especially Europeans, will take a gap year when they're 19, 22s. It's not too often you hear someone doing this kind of crazy, which is what a lot of people called it, when you're in your early 30s, because this is supposedly the time when your career is just going gangbusters. But I just hit that point where I thought, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to be that guy who's 42 years old and looking back and saying, where did these last 10 years go? So it did. Backpacked around the world. It was a life-changing experience on so many levels. And one of the most life-changing places was Africa, which is my background behind me here. And in Africa, when you go to see the animals, everyone talks about the African Big Five, and it's these 5 very specific animals that people talk about. And they gauge the success of their safari experience based on how many of the 5 they see. So if they just see elephants and lions, for example, 2 of the 5, they'd be like, not so great, right? Maybe 3 of the 5 better. But if they see all 5 of the African Big Five, it's like nirvana, everything they dreamed of coming to Africa for. So after my first Café book came out and I was getting asked to speak more and more, and I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? I had a major life epiphany, and it was around this concept. And I remember it hit me. I was standing in the shower and I was thinking about this speaking thing I was supposed to go do, and I was terrified because I had no idea what I was going to talk about. And I had this flash of Africa and the African 5, and I thought to myself, wow, like, what if we were to think about our lives this way? What if we were to identify our personal Big 5? The 5 things that we most want to do, see, or experience in our lifetime before we die, so that if we were to look back at our life, that we could say our life was a success by our own definition of success. And what started as a simple flash of aha, coming out of the shower, out of terror, as I said, because I had to go do the speaking engagement, has become something that has had a wonderfully profound impact on readers around the world. That particular book, that concept is in two variations of my book. One is called Life Safari, which is a story that's set in Africa. And the other one is called The Big Five for Life, which is set in the context of a wonderful leader who's 55 years of age. And we learn that he's dying. And the story talks about why he chose to be the man he was and the leader he was, and how he had such a positive influence on the people around him. And then he dies. And so it's a really emotional, powerful story. But it brings in spirit this concept of the Big Five for life, and how much our life can change and move in such a wonderful direction if we allow ourselves to get clear on what these things are.
That's one of the ways that your work has really impacted me. When I sat down and really thought about my PFE, my purpose for existence, and my Big Five for life, I even have it listed on my website, because it lets people know, this is who I am. This is what I'm so bajiggity about. This is what I love doing every day, and someone who thinks, well, that's kind of weird, or that's kind of strange, or she's not quite as corporate level as I need her to be, or as business-like, that's great, because then they know right off the bat that the energy is going to be wrong from the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what's really cool about this is there was a study done in the 1960s, the concept of 6 degrees of separation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we've talked about this before. So let me explain this, because this is why it's so intriguing to me about what inspires people to want to help other people. And so this experiment was done, the 6 degrees of separation concept. Most of us have heard of that term, 6 degrees of separation, but not all that many people I find know where the term comes from. But it was an experiment that was done in the 1960s. And the idea was to figure out how connected or disconnected we all are. And so a package was sent to someone who lived in the Midwest, Nebraska, I believe it was. And the goal was to get that package hand delivered to someone in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so you had to think, as a recipient of the package, and you couldn't ship it. So you had to think, who do I know that is either going to Cambridge, or who might know someone who knows someone who knows someone who would be going to Cambridge. And what the experiment proved was that it only took 6 people. So if I gave it to the first person, it would be handed off, and eventually 6 people later, it would get to Cambridge, Massachusetts. So that's fascinating, because it shows us how, even with those constraints of you couldn't ship it, that you're still not that far from the destination. Because in these days, I call it finding your who's. You could get on Google and you could find a who in a second, right, for pretty much anything. But what's most intriguing to me about that experiment was the single greatest factor in terms of whether or not someone would pass the package to someone else and the next person was the perceived value of the package. And when someone knew that it had a very high value, they were more likely to participate. Well, when you think about your personal Big Five for life, these are the things that you most want to do, see, or experience in your lifetime before you die. The things that will literally define your life as a success by your own definition of success. The perceived value of this, both to yourself and others, is off the charts. And that means that you can fully expect people to be very engaged in wanting to help you bring this to reality. So the question is, why? Well, Maslow proved this through his experiment, but also, why does anyone help anyone? Mm-hmm. We all do it for the same basic reason. It makes us feel good.
Yeah.
And so we help other people because it makes us feel good. We love to see them progress. We love to see them experience joy and happiness and a smile on their face or whatever. And so when people, A, have the chance to get the joy of helping you, that's one checkbox in your favor. But 2 is when they get a chance to help you for something that is that important, it is unbelievable how people will rally. And I'll give you a small example of that sort of illustrates this. When someone comes to me and they say, hey, John, can you help me find a job? I'm like, no, I won't help you do that. And it's not that I don't like to help, but it's because my follow-on statement to them instantly is, I won't help you find a job. But if you tell me what your dream job is, I'll help you find that. Mm-hmm. And that's the key. So what's wonderful about this is if you allow yourself to get this level of certainty, this level of clarity about your Big Five for life, it gives the rest of the world the opportunity to help you live the life you most want. When you don't have that clarity, the rest of the world, and quite frankly, I'm sure not everyone would necessarily put this in the same context, but I will use my verbiage. It also, when you have this clarity, allows the universe to help you. So it's kind of like, and again, substitute your word of choice, God, universe, energy, whatever. But it's like these sources are looking and they're like, John doesn't have it figured out yet. So we're going to wait. We're going to be patient, sitting on the sidelines. And then once you figure it out, it's like, all right, game on. Now that he is committed, he's clear, he's certain, all of the resources at our disposal will help make that a reality. And I say that not from a hypothetical perspective, but as someone who has lived in the trenches, has had the avalanche of life falling upon me, and then I've experienced it way on the other side where it's just effortless and easy and it's in flow. And that's when you know you're clicking.
And you're so right. I mean, I have experienced it myself. I've had my Big Five for Life listed on my website, as I said, and I've actually had people say, and maybe sometimes I just don't think about it. It's just there. And then I've had people come to me or have conversations with me and they'll say, hey, did you want help with X, Y, or Z? And I was like, and they're saying, well, it's listed on your website, you know? And I'm like, oh yeah.
Like wearing the name tag, right? You got a name tag on, but for you get, and someone walks up and they're like, hey, Nancy. And you're like, wait, how did you know that? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, totally.
And that's the thing about, it's like asking for help. You know, so many of us are afraid to ask for help because we have these fears or these imposter beliefs that, oh, if I ask for help, then people are going to think I'm weak or that I don't know what I'm doing. But as you said, you know, people genuinely like to help other people. So when you put it out there and you let people know, this is what I could use help with, or this is what would really help me today. If they're in a position to do it, they'll do it.
And I'll give you a tip for that. This is something that I developed recently. And that is, it's really awesome to have a micro and a macro example. So when someone says, that's awesome, you want to go to Africa? I saw it on your Big Five for Life site. Like, how can I help you? If you can have an instant micro example of how they could help you. So, and that might be, for example, you might say, tell me the best book you've ever read about Africa, or tell me the one country, if I had to go, that you would highly recommend me going to Africa. And so that's something very small that in an instant conversation, even with a complete stranger, they likely could offer some assistance, right? Mm-hmm. And then have a macro example too. So like there's a reason, if someone says, I want to go to Africa, but I haven't gone yet, there's a reason, there's a hurdle, there's a barrier, there's an obstacle, right? And so the micro example is, well, what's a micro hurdle that you're facing? And then the macro hurdle is, I don't know what the hurdle would be for someone, but what is it? It could be as simple as, I really am stymied. I don't even know where to begin. Mm-hmm. Right? So that might be your macro hurdle. But understanding those two things for each of your Big Five for Life, then when someone says, how can I help? At the ready, you've got your statement, your answer, et cetera, so that you can engage in that conversation and give that person the opportunity to be happy by helping you. Because you're 100% right. And I lived in that space for so long. I grew up in an environment where if someone helped you, then there was a expectation that there was going to be a call in on the favor at some point in the future. Mm-hmm. And so I learned a long time ago as a kid, don't accept help. And, but unfortunately that was based on a sample size of like 2, right? That was not the world at large. The world at large is that the people really love to help. It's totally true.
And I love that. I'm going to really keep that on my mind about the micro and the macro, because I'm often, when I have conversations, especially with if it's someone that I've just met, and I'll say, how could I support you? Usually they're at a loss for words, you know, like, no, I think I'm good right now. And we all need support, whatever. Maybe it's just like, hey, send good thoughts my way.
Exactly. And I think we default to that, no, everything is fine, because we don't know what to ask for and we don't want to appear like we're clueless. And so we default to the I'm fine. Yeah, but in truth, if we were fine, then whatever the item is would already be our reality. And so, yeah, no, in a very gentle way, I think it's an awesome connection point. And so in the example you just gave, it would be awesome to say, okay, cool. Well, if you ever think of a micro example for, you know, maybe you need a connection to somebody or something like that. So we can sort of spoon feed an example of a way that we might be able to help the person.
Yes. I'd like to talk a little bit about the who's as well. When I explain it, I always feel like I'm a Dr. Seuss book, but I use that example so much. So I'd like for you to talk about that a little bit, please.
This is another major learning that I had as I was going through the process of getting out from underneath the avalanche of life and to the point where you're walking the path that is uniquely yours. And I think it goes back to this asking for help thing. So I was always under the impression that I had to figure it all out on my own. And what I've learned over time is that when we are here and we want to go here, the question everybody always asks is, well, how do I get there? Mm-hmm. And that how question is incredibly problematic because the how question ends up being a mountain of obstacles. And if the dream is big enough, if the big 5 for life item is big enough, we will persevere. We'll invest our time, all our energy, our financial resources, everything else to get to the top of that mountain. Unfortunately, in life, when you get to the top of the mountain and you look out, inevitably what you're looking at is at least one more mountain, and typically more. Again, people will invest the time, the energy, the resources, they'll get to the top of that second mountain. But usually what happens is by the time they get to the third one, they give up. They're out of time, they're out of energy, they're out of resources, etc. And that's really sad. That just means that they succumbed to this how question. So I've learned over time a much better question is who. If going to Africa is my dream, then who has done, seen, or experienced going to Africa? And if I'm willing to learn everything I can about that person and then follow their path, at least at the start, it literally propels me over the tops of these initial 2 or 3 mountains. And that's what gives us momentum. You know, it's those first 3 mountains that sort of suck the energy and the spirit out of you. But if you get some early traction, then you really find yourself propelled in a way that it's easier to deal with adversity if you encounter adversity after that. In these days, as we talked about a little earlier, it's, you know, Stanley Milgram was the guy who did the experiment that we were talking about earlier, but that was in the 1960s. These days, you want to learn about going to Africa? Oh my gosh, get on Google. It's the ultimate, we call it Google. It's the ultimate who. Get on Google and type in, you know, what's the path to Africa, or tell me about Africa, or, you know, type in the country you want to go to in Africa. You're going to have access to thousands of links and videos. Get on, you know, between YouTube and Google, like whether you're a visual person or a text person, insane amounts of access. Mm-hmm. And if you really want to make it personal, this is so simple and so easy. And, you know, it just requires getting out of our own way. If you figure out your big 5 for life, you go through the process of discovering that, and you figure out one, you know, going to Africa is one of your big 5 for life. Type up a very simple email that says, hey, everybody, know it's been a while since we talked. I just wanted to share something that I'm super excited about. I figured out that for 2021, my dream is to go to Africa. I'm not sure where to even begin on this adventure. If you know someone who's been to Africa, or if you've been to Africa, I would love to talk to you. Thanks, John. Send, right? And send it to everybody in your database, your email list. You just never know who's literally sitting one email away, who is the perfect connection to get you all fired up and launch you over the tops of those first 3 mountains.
Absolutely. And, you know, when we can share something that means a lot to us, it helps others know how they can be part of our world as well. And for instance, several years ago, I made a choice that every August, which is my birthday month, I would take the whole month to reflect on where I've been, where I am, where I'd like to go. And this past August was no different. And when I shared that concept with so many people in my database, I was really overjoyed at the feedback. Like, I love that idea. I'm going to start doing that. And, yeah. You know, so you can share something that means a lot to you, and then it's like a ripple effect, you know, that whether somebody picks up on it or they don't pick up on it, but it's like, whoa, that's an awesome idea.
Yeah. So interesting that you say that, because the title of the book that I just released is called What I've Learned. Mm-hmm. And in the intro, I write that I didn't title it that way because I think the world is desperately waiting to hear what John Strelecky has learned. What I have learned, though, is that everybody has genius within them. Everybody has learned things that have had these major impacts on their life. And so my hope is that by reading some of the examples that I share in the book, that someone says, oh yeah, like I remember when I discovered this about life, and then thinks to themselves, you know what? Yeah, who do I want to share that with? Maybe it's my grandkids. Maybe it's my kids. Maybe it's that best friend of mine who's really been struggling with something and I just didn't connect the dots until this moment, right? But that's my dream really, is that we all have the opportunity to reflect on the things that we've learned. And maybe at the end of the day, maybe it's for us, maybe there's things that we've learned but forgotten that we knew. And by taking a few minutes to just write them down or reflect on them, that it then launches our lives in that upward trajectory over the tops of those obstacles that we're looking for.
I think that's an excellent concept, because what I was thinking as you were saying that, it's also, we tend to overlook the huge accomplishment in what we've learned. Because we're so busy doing and always going. And then when we learn something new or we experience something new, we look at it as a stepping stone to get to the next step, instead of just stopping and looking at it.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is you only know what's inside your head.
Right.
And so, you start to forget that these things that you've learned that you now take for granted, you haven't always known them. And you take them for granted now because they are easy, but until you know it, you don't know it. And so when I was so underneath the avalanche of life and I didn't understand these ideas of how people want to help you or the way in which the universe can rally to assist you, it was very tough. And so, now I reflect back on that and I think, so there's another 18-year-old kid who's just like I was when I was 18, who doesn't know this either.
Right.
And think of how fast I could have accelerated my path had I have known these things. And so what vehicle can I use to share these ideas, these thoughts? And you're right, not everybody's going to read it and be like, this is exactly what I needed. But I remember being 18 and saying to myself, what do I need to figure this out? And so again, there's got to be somebody else who's 18 asking that same question. And maybe the perfect person to do it is whoever is listening to this call. And so think about who you were earlier in your life, and there's somebody just like you, and maybe that's the reason to share your wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to talk about this book that you just released within this last week, What I've Learned. Here's the very first question that I have burning in my mind. Is it available in English?
It's in English in ebook format only, yes. So, but it's an ebook in iTunes as well as Amazon. So if you're a Kindle user or you read off your phone or even read off your computer, it is 100% available.
I'm so glad to hear that, because honestly, I've been searching for it and I can find it. It's in German, I think, right?
Yeah, so it was released in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and I think it's coming out in French Canada in another couple of weeks. And I know my books are often staggered. They don't come out worldwide on the exact same day. So yes, this time we were able to release the English version of it on the same day.
Excellent. All right. Well, maybe I came to the German edition first, and I was like, well, that doesn't help me.
No, it's really intriguing on Amazon now. So it takes a couple of days for Amazon to sort of get their algorithm together. But if you type in What I've Learned Strelecky, it will pop up for you.
Excellent, because you know that before the end of the day, that will be on my Kindle reader, because I have every one of your books. I've read every one of them more than 2-3 times. And that's an understatement. I also want to let people know, if you go to YouTube and type in Museum Day, search Museum Day, John Strelecky, Strelecky, just like on the screen there. There will be a video that will come up that is less than 4 minutes that will totally change your life, because it changes the way you think. It inspires you. I just shared it with a friend yesterday, and she would rather listen to books rather than, she's very visual. And I said, come on, this video is less than 4 minutes, watch this. And I was watching her face when she was watching it, and she was like, oh my gosh. And I said, I told you. And awesome. Yes, so I highly recommend it. Every time I speak, every time I share anything with anybody, I'm always telling people, all right, look, less than 4 minutes. And there have been times when I've been teaching workshops, I've had everyone get out their smartphone and say, okay, for the next 4 minutes, we're all going to watch this video. And, whether they're, like go into it screaming and fighting or get anything out of it, this is why I do it. It's because I can't determine or force anything on anyone, but I can certainly share the information. And then what they do with it, they do with it. So
Yeah.
let's go back to your newest book, What I've Learned. What was the, I don't know, like the thought process that you're like, okay, this is the next book I'm going to write?
Well, so the museum day concept that you're talking about is from the Big Five for Life book. And I'll share a story and that'll explain the answer to your question about what I've learned.
Okay.
And so I was walking through this tiny little museum in Winter Garden, Florida, this really small little town close to where I live. And I was walking through there and I was looking at these pictures, and they've got all these old pictures of people from the town's history. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, like, because all these pictures are from like, high school pictures from like the 1920s. And so all the stuff that you're looking at, all the people in those pictures have probably in all likelihood passed away. And I remember walking through there thinking to myself, I wonder what their life was like. Did they get to the end and think to themselves, I really did it? Like, did they ask out that girl that they always wanted to ask out? Did they get on that tramp steamer and go see the world, And so I find that as I'm going through my everyday life, the way my brain works is I have these sort of thoughts and these wonderments. And it usually then translates into something that is useful in some capacity for the way that I approach life. The majority of the books that I write, the Café books in the series, the Big Five for Life books, are written as a story. And so this Life Safari, for example, is an adventure story set in Africa. And so these concepts and ideas are within the stories, but the whole thing is a story. But sometimes I've got stuff that I think is really good stuff, and I don't necessarily have a story that I tie it all together with. And so the idea of what I've learned is that I would arrange things in categories. And so there is the category of love. So within the love category, there are short essays, if you will, short stories. And so this gives me a chance to do a little bit different style writing-wise. And I know some of my fans write to me and they're like, I love this, but I really love the stories, And so I think I was motivated by that because in this particular book, the stories are typically, 2 to 4 pages long. So they're a little bit longer than just a single concept. But it is that. It's in categories of love and nature and connection and success and myself. And so it was just a good vehicle by which I was able to take these aha moments that I've had in life and put them out there in the hopes that they make a positive difference in the lives of others. And also, I think that people might look at a story and say, you know what, that's like outside of my sweet spot. I don't think I could ever write a 200-page book. But I really firmly believe that everybody in reading what I've learned could say to themselves, absolutely, like I've got a number of these things in my life that have been life-changing that I've discovered, and I'm going to share them with somebody, whether it's in a blog post, a conversation over lunch, or any other vehicle that works for them. And therefore, I think this format works because it's a sort of a little bite-sized version that anybody can jump onto, which I'm excited about. Because I think that's it, right? As a world, we grow when we all have the opportunity to share with each other. I mean, I can't imagine where my life would be at this point had it not been for the contributions others have made in my life, books and otherwise.
Well, I'm excited, obviously, to download that today. But something I wanted to say about Museum Day, the video itself, so I've watched it numerous times. Obviously, I share it with people. And at some point, I got to the point of, at the end of the day, when I would write things down in my journal, rather than just like write successes or something, I would visualize something really awesome that happened that day, something that maybe I wasn't expecting. And so I like create a picture in my mind of it. And so when I write it, I would say, I'm adding this picture to my museum day. This is what made a great museum day for me today. And because it's very visual. And I find that when I go back, it's like I drop right into the feeling of it because it brings up a vision.
Yeah, pictures are amazing. They bring back the smells, the sounds, everything associated with that moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I for one am so looking forward to, I know what I'm going to be doing tonight, reading this book. I'm sure, I will do it tonight. John, can you tell everyone like how they can get in touch with you and and I was going to name all of your books, and How to Be Rich and Happy. I know you co-authored that. Life Safari, Why Café, Return to Why Café, The Big Five for Life, The Big Five for Life Continued, and now What I've Learned. Did I miss anything?
No, that was it. But I will say there's one little caveat. So I've got some very exciting news as it relates to the Café series.
Okay.
And that is that, so you're right, the original titling of that book, well, actually the very original titling of that book was called The Why Are You Here Café.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became The Why Café, and we're releasing a very special edition in about 30 days. And so I will send you a copy courtesy of me, because I know of that book. But we're retitling it, and we're retitling it because there's a very cool, I can only share so much information about this. There's a very cool project underway, which is going to enable people to experience the cafe in a highly visual format. Let's see, I think I'm just about on the edge of where I can go.
I think I know what it is, but I'm not.
So I have to stop there. I'll get myself in trouble with the people that I can't get myself in trouble with. But I will say that the title of that project, which you would probably see on a much bigger format screen, is called The Café on the Edge of the World. And so a new version of the Café book is coming out in about 30 days, which is called The Café on the Edge of the World. I've gone back through the story and made small little updates to it as I've progressed as a writer. And I'm really excited about it coming out. So when people are listening to this or watching this and then looking on Amazon, you're going to want to type in The Café on the Edge of the World if you're doing that after October 15th of 2020.
Excellent. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And I will watch for that and share it as well. So
yes, and when the other announcement is actually officially able to announce, I'll come back on and we'll talk about that, because it's going to be super fun.
Excellent. I would love to help share that as well. So please tell people, how to connect with you, how to stay in touch and follow you.
Yeah, so I'm active on all social media channels, and thanks to my team especially. And so if you're someone who says, wow, I like to get an inspirational quote, I love to hear inspirational stuff, then check out what we're doing on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, because we're on all of those channels. You can also track me down on my website, which is very easy if you are watching this, because it's basically johnstrelecky.com, my name. And so that's JOHNSTRELECKY.com. And so with anything that we can be of assistance with, don't hesitate to look on those resources. Send us a message via the social media outlets or via the website, and we're always happy to help. So love to do that.
Excellent. John, thank you so much for sharing time with me today. As I said before we even started recording this, I was really looking forward to this. I know I've had the opportunity to interview you twice before when I was doing my podcast, but doing this video, I was super excited because as I said, I love sharing your work. I love what it does for me. And when I am open and I am being inspired, it helps me to be open and inspire others. So who wouldn't want to share that? So you're one of my who's.
And thanks for the work that you're doing. We were talking about how this idea of what I've learned and how a simple concept, a single word can enable us to rethink our lives. And so this imposter syndrome that we were talking about earlier, like what a great concept, what a great name. And my gosh, if I'd have heard that when I was 18 and had a little bit of guidance to really think through that, I can only imagine what avalanches of life I could have probably avoided. And so thank you for coming up with these ideas and sharing them with the world. I think that's how we do our best to make this place a little bit better than it was when we got here.
Well, you are welcome. And I appreciate you being part of my life. And for all of you that are watching this, if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and share this video. Let other people know the wonderful work that John's doing. And you could become one of both of our who's. That would be wonderful.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. Have a blessed week. Enjoy. And I hope every single day is a great museum day for you. And if you really still aren't quite clear on what that is, remember, go to YouTube and type in Museum Day, John Strelecky, and you will be forever changed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. All right. Have a great rest of your week. Ciao for now.